Your friends are not going to be very happy with you when you play this deck, and that's okay. So, a few days ago, I made a video about Kefka Court Mage. It was a $15 deck, and I've played that deck now with friends at my local card shop, and it performed really, really well. What I've only had a little bit of time to test, though, is the full power variant of it, but I think y'all are gonna have fun with this one, especially if you enjoyed my Sauron Lieutenant's Reanimator deck. This is very much in the same vein of being a very powerful, very Archenemy, very 1v3 style deck that can very, very quickly overpower a table and get out of hand, mostly by denying the table a ton of resources without using stacks pieces. So let's go ahead and talk about this absolutely maniacal and evil set of 99 cards. Kefka Court Mage is a Grixis and 2 human wizard who, when he enters or attacks, each player discards a card. Then you will draw a card for every card type among the cards discarded this way. Then, if you want, you can pay 8 and flip him over into Kefka, Ruler of Ruin, and then reshape the entire world in your image, or at the very least resculpt your hand by punching people in the face. Now, I generally will not flip Kefka because I find the group discard from him far more powerful than anything else that you could do. I instead would like to rely on the 99 of the deck to do the just larger amount of my power swinging at my opponents. So this is a Reanimator deck. Let's go ahead and talk about our Reanimation targets. There are some basic ones in here like Troll of Khazad-dûm and Oliphant. These are here solely so that we can run a lower land count. We are running 39 lands. Normally I would run 40 or 41, but by running these we can cycle them away in order to guarantee that we have Reanimation targets if we need them, and their cycling can yank us the lands out of our deck as we need them. We also have some massive tempo swingers like Sepulchre Primordial, Diluvian Primordial, and Kefka Dancing Mad, though these were all in the original build of the deck as well. These are not anything new for what the deck is doing. Each and every one of them is a creature that when they touch the board, they can start stealing all kinds of things from our opponents and giving us massive advantages in doing so. But we need to talk about the other cards that make up the deck that do more than just what the original version of the Kefka deck did. And for that, let's talk about Sphinx of the Second Sun. This is a card that I have learned in Archenemy games is persona non grata to your opponents. The worst thing that they can deal with is thinking, oh, well, he's going to end his turn, and then he's not going to have any mana to counter my spells, and then I'll be able to do whatever I need. And then you just untap all of your lands and look at your opponent and go, no, 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 no. We're going to keep on playing this game even on your turn. Sphinx of the Second Sun enables that in spades. He's a powerful Reanimation target, and even though our deck is low on instants, our opponents don't really need to know that. We can be a bluffing villain as well. They just need to know that our deck has instant removal and has counter spells, and the Sphinx of the Second Sun will have a target on its back, which is what we want. Then we have Archon of Cruelty, one of my favorite Reanimation targets. Enters the battlefield, makes an opponent sack a creature, lose 3 life, discard a card. Then we draw a card, then we gain 3 life, and it will do this every time it attacks as well. Then we're going to run Niv Mizzet Perun. No infinite combos with this guy, but the ability to not only have some burn attached to our draw, since our deck does draw a ton of cards, and the fact that he draws cards at a very rapid rate. Every time a player casts an instant or sorcery spell, of which our deck contains 19 to begin with, you will be able to draw a card. He can fill your hand up quick, and he does something that is way more important than just drawing you cards. He draws aggro away from Kefka. People can make a choice between getting rid of the creature who is drawing you tons of cards whenever they do things, or the card that is causing them to deal with resource denial that they can kind of play around, and then once they're empty of cards, does not draw cards anymore. So they basically have a Faustian bargain here. Every single option they have sucks, but they need to choose one to advance their game state. Then we're going to be running Y'shtola Rule from the new Final Fantasy set as well. At the beginning of our end step, we can exile the creature we control, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control, and then, if this is the first time this has happened this turn, there is an additional end step after this step. So, why is this here? Well, put very simply, Y'shtola gives us the ability to make our opponents discard 6 cards out of their hands collectively using Kefka. Kefka comes onto the board, makes them all discard 1. Y'shtola blinks it, now they've all discarded 2, now Y'shtola sees a second end phase, and now they will all discard a 3rd card for a collective 9 cards on the turn that we have either attacked or summoned Kefka. Players losing 9 cards and us going at the very least even with that, or drawing a card for every card they've discarded in the best of scenarios, is a very hard hill for people to climb over. And remember, we are playing an Archenemy deck. The idea from the get-go is to make our opponents feel like they have to gang up on us, and if they don't, then the game is going to be closed out in our favor. But we have more direct ways to get this exact same result with Jin-Gitaxias Core Augur. At the beginning of our end step, we are allowed to draw 7 cards, and each opponent's maximum hand size is reduced by 7. If players are not playing cards like Reliquary Tower and Thought Vessel, then the Jin-Gitaxias Core Augur is going to strip their hands down to nothing. And while this does non-bow with our commander, it only non-bows with our commander insofar as we don't get to draw a lot of cards with our commander anymore. But we don't need that if Jin is drawing us tons of cards, so we're basically okay with that. Then we have Sheoldred herself. The flip Sheoldred makes everybody sack a creature when it comes out, and of course can flip into a targeted destruction card that can make each opponent discard 3 cards, perfect for what the deck is trying to do, and can also reanimate all creatures in all graveyards onto our board for a final game-winning swing. Sheoldred Whispering One has a similar ability of making everybody sacrifice and then reanimating creatures on our turn. Much slower, but still very powerful. Then we have Valgavoth Terror Eater. Flying, lifelink, ward, sacrifice 3 non-land permanents. If a card we do not control is put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, then we exile that card, and then we are allowed to play that card. Then we have Glasspool Mimic, which can basically become a copy of anything we want. Our deck is chock full of legendary creatures, so we are usually going to use this to copy things like the Sepulchre Primordial, the Diluvian Primordial, or to get an extra effect out of our Kefka to make everybody discard cards again. But, you know, getting extra copies of things like Archon of Cruelty is never a bad thing. I'm going to interrupt this deck video about a deck that is evil and mean and cruel to tell you that you should be subscribing to the channel. I would greatly appreciate it, and it would mean the world to me. I would also really like if you guys could check out my Fourth Wall shop, where I've got a channel playmat there that you can pick up. It's the one showcased here. I would love to see pictures of y'all on Blue Sky or whatever social media you use repping the channel. That would be fantastic. Submit them to me, and I will show them on screen during videos. That shit makes my day when I see it. Also, remember that if you want to pick up this deck or any other deck that I've talked about, then please consider using my Mana Pool link. That will take you to Mana Pool, where you can get all of your cards, and there is a card optimizer there to make sure that you get the best prices, and I get a kickback from that, so it helps me help you. Please and thank you. Let's get back to the video. We're also going to run in some ways to get some evasion. Wonder and Filth can both make sure that we are able to get in there and hit our opponents without being interacted with. And because we are a combat reanimator deck, we need lots of haste enablers. So let's go ahead and finish the trifecta off with Anger to give all of our creatures haste as long as we've got a mountain. Then we'll have Swiftfoot Boots, Lightning Greaves, and the new Fire Crystal to give our creatures haste. The Fire Crystal also allows us to make token copies of things if we want to sink mana into it, and it doubles as a ramp piece. So honestly, this is doing a ton of work for us. But here is where the bread and butter of the deck begins to shine. You've seen the reanimation targets. Now let's talk about the reanimation spells, and each and every one of these is built to be a tempo swing of some kind. Now, you've got early game spells like Reanimate and Stitch Together and Animate Dead. Each of these has the purpose of being an early game reanimation spell that we can use after using a looter of some sort so that we can get a good foot in and established well. But every other spell is meant to be a tempo swing. Will of the Abzan makes each opponent sack a creature and then reanimates a creature if we have our commander out. That immediately means that we are going to neg our opponents down by 3 compared to us, and if we get a tempo swinging creature, then this just does even more. Then we have Espers to Magicite. This will reanimate a creature from each of our opponent's graveyards, turning them into artifacts on our board that are no longer creatures, but we still get their ETBs and their static abilities, so this can swing things in our favor as well. Breach the Multiverse does a similar stealing of all the cards that we want. It'll steal a creature or planeswalker from every player's graveyard after milling everybody by 10. Coiling Rebirth reanimates a single creature, but if we gift a card to an opponent, a card we're going to make them discard anyway, then the Coiling Rebirth will reanimate 2 creatures from our graveyard. Yawgmoth's Vile Offering can reanimate a creature, but it also gets rid of a creature on the board when we use it, so that we are not always pigeonholed into reanimating a control creature if there's a threat on the board. Then we have Rejoin the Fight. This allows us to mill 3 cards, and then starting with the next opponent in turn order, we have them select a creature from our grave that they want us to reanimate. Yes, they may end up hitting a couple of our looters, but that doesn't hurt us very much, because with 3 potential reanimation targets all the time, we'll always get at least something out of this. Then Metamorphosis Fanatic enters the battlefield and reanimates anything and gives it a lifelink counter. We are a Archenemy deck, so that lifelink can help us get out of bad situations. Rise of the Dark Realms reanimates everything in all graveyards, and the Final Fantasy print is perfect for the flavor of the deck we're playing, and Pinnacle Monk can get any of our spells out of the graveyard, and it just can be a land as well, so it allows us to run fewer lands in the deck while still having tons of utility. And then we have Malakir Rebirth, allowing us to reanimate a creature if it were to die. This is great when our opponents try to throw board wipes at us, or we even board wipe ourselves. Reanimating Kefka gives us another +3 anytime that we use this. And that does it for the core of the deck. We are going to be reanimating lots of big, strong, threatening, tempo-swinging creatures, and our opponents are going to have to get rid of us as soon as possible, or they're going to run out of resources. They're literally going to be on a ticking time bomb to figure out how to kill us in time. My Sauron deck was built on the idea of inevitability. Eventually, the Sauron deck will be able to construct full board states every single turn. The Kefka deck is more of a grinding station. This is a villain that is stripping you of your resources as you go, making certain that the longer you are engaged in conflict with the villain, the worse things get for you. Not because the villain is going to make that strong of a board presence that quickly, but because you are being poisoned. You are being drained. Everything that you are is slipping away the longer you engage in conflict with this deck. I don't know, the flavor felt really good to me. Anyway, let's talk about card draw. Now, obviously, Mr. Palazzo himself is going to be one of our strongest sources of card draw, but we need more than just that. So let's add in looters. Vohar Vidalian Desecrator, a looter that can also allow us to go into our graveyard and cast a instant or sorcery. Dreadwing Scavenger, a looter that gains Flying Death Touch the later we get into the game. Obsessive Stitcher, a looter that can reanimate things from the grave. Malcolm, Alluring Scoundrel, a looter that can allow us to cast things for free. And then Brass's Tunnel Grinder, a wheel that we can use to reset our hand, and if we give it some time, it'll flip into the Tekaton Searing Rift, which allows us to add Discover onto the end of any permanent spell that we cast, which means we get 2 spells for the price of 1 every single turn. Then we're going to run Valakut Awakening, another wheel that will allow us to reset a bad hand, but it's primarily here because it's part of our land base. And then let's add in a Monument to Endurance. Anytime we discard a card, we get to choose one of these options that hasn't been chosen yet. Draw a card, create a treasure token, or make each opponent lose 3 life. With Kefka, this is going to be easy as hell to trigger. Then we have Tiny Bones Bauble Burglar. Anytime an opponent discards a card, exile it from their grave with a stash counter on it, and then during our turn, we are allowed to play those cards on our own. Now, this is not technically draw, but it is giving us the same card advantage as a draw card, so I'm gonna count it. Now, if you're wanting to play Pure Evil, you can swap this Tiny Bones out for a Tergrid, but I'm not gonna do that because I feel like the deck is already powerful enough without basically deliberately unfair effects. When it's something like Valgavoth, it's much harder to summon. I'm okay with that. But when it's something like Tergrid, I don't know. Just the card leaves a really bad taste in my mouth. The instant grabbing of everything as opposed to having to wait a turn cycle, having a more restrictive mana cost. Like, there's just other things that bother me with Tergrid. She's hot, though. That said, that does mean that we are done with our draw engine. Now we got to talk about our ways we're going to be removing things from the board. We've already kind of talked about a few of those because some of our removals are stapled to reanimation spells and stapled to creatures, but we have some other dedicated removal we got to talk about. So let's get into that. On the removal and interaction side, we are running 14 removal pieces and 3 board wipes, and let's go ahead and start with one of my favorites, Dusk Mangler. As an additional cost to play this card, sack a creature, discard a card, or pay for life. We're never doing that. We're always reanimating this. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent sacks a creature, discards a card, and loses 4 life. For 4 cents, you cannot get any better, I promise you. Then we have Gaius von Belzar, a Fleshbag Marauder style card that can also get rid of enchantments, which is fantastic. A Cursed Marauder, probably one of the strongest Fleshbag Marauder style cards as it dodges tokens, and it also costs less mana than other Fleshbag Marauder style cards. We also have Eldest Reborn, which does the same thing as a Fleshbag Marauder style card, but it can also make opponents discard cards, and it can reanimate things from their graveyards. Then we have Rankle, Master of Pranks, a flying haster that when he deals combat damage to a player, we can make each player discard a card. There's other text on him as well, but generally speaking, we're just going to force opponents to discard cards because we can handle that and they probably can't. Then we're going to run Anzrag's Rampage. With all the powerful reanimation targets in our deck, why not wipe all the artifacts that we don't need off the board and then summon a giant creature with haste and then put it into our hand to discard later with Kefka? It just feels perfect, honestly. Anzrag's Rampage, I prefer this over Vandal Blast in most situations. Then let's go ahead and have the MDFCs of Hagra Mauling and Fell the Profane. Both of them can get rid of a creature at instant speed, and both of them can be lands when the situation calls for it. Then we're going to run a combination of Counterspell and an Offer You Can't Refuse. We're not running too many counterspells because I'm going to be relying mostly on grinding our opponents out of potential options and then just using these to make sure that game-winning plays get stopped. That said, both of these can counter problematic spells on the stack, so hold them for when they are most necessary. Withering Torment can be used to get rid of a problematic creature or an enchantment. Virtue of Persistence can be used to get rid of creatures with Indestructible. It also has the benefit of being a reanimation spell later in the game. And finally, we have 2 powerhouse cards. Overlord of the Boiler Briggs hits a creature for 4 anytime it enters or attacks, and Terror of the Peaks, which will burn an opponent or a creature on the board every time we have a large creature enter the battlefield. Terror of the Peaks in a reanimation deck is nasty, especially if you summon it with something like Breach the Multiverse, where it will automatically see a bunch of other creatures touch the board alongside it, getting rid of all kinds of cards. Then we've got the deck's board wipes, a Necromantic Selection to get rid of all creatures and then reanimate one of those creatures, usually Kefka, a Too Greedily Too Deep to reanimate a single creature and then make it deal its power in damage to all creatures on the board. And if you did not know, this card works so stupidly well with Valgavoth, it's insane. Let me explain. Too Greedily Too Deep makes a creature deal its power as damage to other creatures, meaning that the source of the damage is not Too Greedily Too Deep. The source of the damage will be the creature. If you choose Valgavoth, he's got lifelink and 9 power. So if there are 10 creatures on the board, Too Greedily Too Deep will have Valkavoth deal 9 damage to each of them, gaining us 90 life. And then all those creatures, of course, will be castable by Valkavoth if they were ones that our opponents owned. And once they are castable by Valkavoth, how do you cast them? Paying life. And what happens when you have Valkavoth gaining you 90 life? You've got all the life you need to pay for all those cards. It becomes an instant tempo swing in your favor. Not quite a game-winning combo, but certainly a combo that will put your opponents on edge. Then, after Too Greedily Too Deep, we have one more, and that is Incinerator of the Guilty, a 6-mana 6/6 flying trample dragon that says, whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may collect evidence X. When you do, Incinerator of the Guilty will deal X damage to each creature and each planeswalker that player controls. This is not a full board wipe, but it is a targeted board wipe you can use if there is a fellow Archenemy player out and you want to make good with your other teammates before, betraying them as well. Incinerator of the Guilty does require some setup, but since we are discarding and milling in this deck very often, it should be easy to get the setup for the Guilty online. And that does it for all of our removal. Now all we got to do is talk about mana, and we are off to the races. Now, for a deck like this, I really want our ramp pieces to be high utility pieces, and for some of these we can manage that, and for some we can't. For the ones we can't manage, Wayfarer's Bauble is your generic grab a land out of the deck card. Fellwar Stone and Arcane Signet and Worn Power Stone do not have any utility other than being very good and mana efficient rocks. But for our utility ones, let's run an Honored Heirloom so that we can get rid of problematic cards in our opponent's graveyards, since we are the ones sending them there in the first place. A Sad Robot, since it will not only give us lands that we can use that are easiest to protect, because lands don't get blown up in games of Casual Commander usually, but it can also draw us cards if we get hit with, say, a board wipe or something. That's great. Then we have Cursed Mirror, a ramp spell that can also become a copy of a creature for a turn. This can very quickly throw things in our favor. Use this as a copy of Kefka. It'll die, obviously, but then all of our opponents will be discarding tons of cards. Use it as a copy of Sad Robot if you want, Sepulchre Primordial, any of those, and you'll be fine. Then we have the Warring Triad, a 3-mana mana rock that allows us to mill cards, which is exactly what the deck wants to do in the first place. And then if we have 8 or more cards in the graveyard, it becomes a 5/5 with Flying, Trample, and Haste. Very, very interesting mana rock that I'm happy to see in the new set. Then for lands, we're running 2 islands, 2 mountains, and 3 swamps, with our untapped Dimir lands being Shipwreck Marsh, Clearwater Pathway, Watery Grave, and Morphic Pool, with a single tapped land being the Underground Sewer because it is searchable and it does allow us to surveil. For Izzet, we are running 2 untapped lands, Training Center and Steam Vents, with the tapped land being Thundering Falls for similar reasons. Then for Rakdos, we are running Graben Caverns, Haunted Ridge, Blighted Pathway, Blood Crypt, and Luxury Suite as our untapped lands, as our deck does favor red and black more than anything. And then, of course, a single tapped land with Raucous Theater. Then we have the Omni lands of Exotic Orchard and Command Tower with a Xander's Lounge as our tapped land because it can be cycled and it can be searched. And then we're going to be running the fetching lands of Seething Landscape since we can cycle it if we get mana flooded, and it can also get any basic land we need out of the deck. Bloodstained Mire, Polluted Delta, and Scalding Tarn. After that, the only thing left is our utility lands, so we have an Urza's Cave, so we can grab other good utility lands, Rogue's Passage to make sure our commander can make it through if we ever have to flip it, Port of Karfell to give us one more instance of reanimation in the deck, Bajuka Bog to get rid of reanimation targets in our opponent's graveyards, and because we have a Filth, we're going to be running an Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth, hopefully yanked out with our Urza's Cave to make everything a swamp. Now, Filth can grant everything Swamp Walk, and we can run right into our enemies' bases without them being able to do diddly about it. And that does it for the entirety of the deck. All that's left to do now is show you how to play it, and let's have a good time being evil. Now, what I'd like to do is keep a 3-land hand that has a ramp spell, but the closest we're going to get is a 2-land hand with an MDFC and a ramp spell. I'm okay with that, though, since we have an underground sewers we can use to sculpt our hand. Let's draw our opening card, play the sewers, surveil, and it's a watery grave. I'd like to keep that on top. Move to the next turn. Let's go ahead and shock in that watery grave, tap 2, and play the arcane signet. Moving into turn 3, we have a Metamorphosis Fanatic, but even though we have hit the miracle, we do not have anything in our grave for this to use. So that is unfortunate for us. So we're going to pay 3, and we are going to play Dreadwing Scavenger, and we are going to throw away that Jin Cataxis so that our opponents can try to Bojuka Bog us early. Then let's play a Mountain and past our opponents. Then we move into turn 4, and we have an Honored Heirloom, and we even have access to some other cards right now. We can maybe even get Jin out kind of early. We can get Kefka out now, though. So let's flip over our Pinnacle Monk, and let's go ahead and summon Kefka. This is going to pop out, and it's going to make everybody discard a card. Now, this early in the game, Diluvian Primordial's not that great, so I want to hold on to this for a bit. We're going to instead throw away our Archon of Cruelty. Now, our opponents are very likely to try to Bojuka Bog us, but if they can't get to it, that sucks for them. Kefka Palazzo is going to draw us cards for each thing we go away. The most likely cards to get rid of are lands and creatures, so let's just assume we draw 2 cards off of this. We drew an Espers to Magicite, which can be really useful later. Let's swing with the Dreadwing Scavenger, allowing us to draw another card and discard our Sphinx of the Second Sun. Now we have 3 very good reanimation targets and a really well-sculpted hand for whatever our opponents might throw at us. Now, let's go ahead and go into turn 5. We've drawn a counterspell, and I would have liked to see the ability to play the Metamorphosis Fanatic, but we don't have that right now. So let's go ahead and tap out, play Yawgmoth's Vile Offering. We are going to say, yes, we have Kefka, so the legendary sorcery can be cast. We are going to blow up one of your creatures and then reanimate one of mine. I'm going to choose my Archon. No, we have a counterspell in the hand. Because we have a counterspell in the hand, the correct thing to get is the Sphinx of the Second Sun, because the Sphinx will allow us to untap our cards and hold the counterspell for if our opponents try to wipe us out. We have other ways to reanimate things. We don't need to worry about it just yet. Then let's enter combat, swing with Kefka and the Dreadwing Scavenger. Kefka is going to discard a card out of our hands. The card we get rid of is going to depend entirely on our matchup. If we're not fighting graveyard decks, then Honored Heirloom gets to take the piss and go away. If we're fighting very heavy creature or tribal decks, then Diluvian Primordial has to go away because the likelihood it's going to hit a good card starts to diminish really, really quickly. I'm just going to assume that we are the graveyard deck of the table, and Honored Heirloom is going to take the boot. Artifact goes away, creature and land are likely to be sent to the graveyard. We are going to draw 1, 2, 3 cards, and that gives us a swamp, and I'm actually really, really happy with that. Dreadwing Scavenger then will draw us a card and discard a card. Do we want the Xander's Lounge? I think we actually do want the Xander's Lounge. Because of where we're at, I think it's discard the... we've blown up 1 creature. We want to hold on to everything in our hand. I think it's discard the Accursed Marauder and then play the Xander's Lounge. Because no matter what, we'd have to sculpt down to that anyway. And then Sphinx of the Second Sun is going to untap all of our stuff, draw us a card, and then we can discard a card. I'm going to be honest... I think it's Warring Triad because we don't need a ramp now. We're basically where we want to be. Let's assume that a couple things have happened. Let's assume that we have to counterspell something our opponents played. Let's also assume that we had to protect our Sphinx of the Second Sun, so we are going to use our Malakir Rebirth. And that's about all we would need to do during a turn cycle. So after that, we go to our turn. Let's go ahead and play a Swamp as our land for turn. Tiny Bones is here and available to us. It depends on what we want to do. So if our opponents have good creatures in grave, then the correct thing to do is cast Espers to Magicite and steal those creatures. We have no way of knowing what creatures they have in their grave, though. So the other option is to play Tiny Bones and start making our opponents pick and choose their draws a little more wisely. I think we do that no matter what. Let's go ahead and get Tiny Bones out on the board. That still leaves us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 mana. And we're going to assume that our opponents are going to end up having something that we want to cast with that, and that's what's going to lead to the decision of us not using our mana just yet. We're just going to swing out with everything and see what we get. Of course, Kefka Palazzo is going to make us discard a card. Let's discard that Diluvian Primordial now, and let's draw 1-2 cards because of that. Then Dreadwing Scavenger will draw us a card and discard a card. We have a Raucous Theater in hand, but it does come into play tapped, so let's go ahead and throw it out the window. Now, and yeah, we did play a land for the turn, so that's where we 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, that's where we want to be. So now we will be untapping things in a bit. We don't know what our opponents have, so we don't know what we can spend mana on with Tiny Bones. So we're going to have to play as if we don't have the Tiny Bones stuff. We make decisions as if Tiny Bones is part of the decisions, but we cannot assume what cards our opponents have that we are stealing with Tiny Bones. It's a very hard card to Goldfish with. We have Malcolm and we have Obsessive Stitcher out, so now we have access to more stuff later in the game. We untap all of our cards because of the Sphinx of the Second Sun and draw an extra card. Then we move into turn 7. Let's go ahead and shock in the Steam Vents. And let's see here. We have a bunch of ways to draw and discard, but Obsessive Stitcher can also be used to reanimate something. Here's what I want to do. I want to trigger a mass reanimation. And I think the best way to do that is to enter combat, and let's go ahead and swing with Malcolm, the Sphinx, and all that stuff. Let's go ahead and swing with everything. Kefka, discard a land, draw 2. Malcolm, draw a card and discard a card. Dreadwing Scavenger, draw a card and discard a card. Let's discard the Polluted Delta. Then, with all that, we'll not discard the Polluted Delta. What am I doing? We'll discard the Metamorphosis Fanatic. Then, we are going to pay 1, 2, 3, 4. Crack Obsessive Stitcher to summon the Metamorphosis Fanatic. Summoning the Metamorphosis Fanatic allows us to summon the Diluvian Primordial that now has flying and lifelink. Because our opponents have discarded so many cards even before Tiny Bones, there's likely instant sorceries that we can yank with Diluvian Primordial, and we withheld the knowledge of the Diluvian Primordial for a while, so it's likely that they've put those cards in their grave. So let's go ahead and cast whatever cards we get from them, and then, man, I guess we hold on to the Animate Dead just in case things go sideways. I guess the next thing to do is just cast Espers to Magicite. Oh no, that's an instant. We can do that later. No, we pay 1, 2, 3, 4. We tap Tiny Bones, and we make everybody discard another card. And then, as we end turn, we untap everything. And if our opponents do anything silly or sleazy, we cast Espers to Magicite, and we reanimate things from their graveyards. I didn't even realize that was an instant cast spell. That's nutty. That's nutty. Then we move to turn 8. We have Eldest Reborn. I don't think what we do here matters too terribly much, honestly, because we've got a powerful board state. We've kept a full clutch the entire time, and our opponents have been denied resources throughout the entire game, and we've casted so many spells that they have that we are in a stronger board state than what the game looks like right now. We are in a far stronger board state than that. So I don't think we actually do anything on this turn other than swing out and see what happens. Like, at the end of the day, aside from this Tiny Bones, we just want to see what happens here. So we'll discard the Wayfarer's Bauble to draw 3. Then we'll draw 1 and discard 1 with Malcolm, and draw 1 and discard 1 with Dreadwing Scavenger. And yeah, that denies our opponents of more resources. We get to tap 1, 2, 3, 4, tap Tiny Bones. That's going to make them all discard a card. And then Tiny Bones cannot use its ability on an opponent's turn because it's activate only as a sorcery, but that doesn't really matter because we still get to play a land for turn, tap out, and then play Eldest Reborn, force our opponents to get rid of a creature on each of their boards, and then on our turn, they'll be discarding 3 cards. 1 from Eldest, 1 from Tiny Bones, and 1 from Kefka. They don't have trading cards anymore. They're out of trading cards. That is mean and gross and disgusting. And, I mean, what I would normally do is say, hey, now that you've seen the deck, let's talk about upgrades. But this is the upgraded deck. I mean, obviously, you can add things like Turgid to it if you want to make the deck far more deadly, far more problematic. I personally would not do that because I don't see much of a need to, honestly. The deck only needs the one game changer it's running, which is the Jin Gitaxis. You can run the deck with no game changers, just don't run the Jin, and the deck will run perfectly fine. Though, even with no game changers, saying the deck is a bracket 2 would be a lie. It's not. It's definitely not. This is the upper echelon of bracket 3 that can punch up to bracket 4. The reason it's not a bracket 4 deck is we are not running tutors and we are not running cards like Turgid. We are deliberately not running the things that we would need to be running to make the deck super duper streamlined. Like a Buried Alive putting the best reanimation targets, or an Entomb putting the best reanimation targets in the grave really early would increase the power of the deck by like double, and that would move us into bracket 4. That's not what we're trying to do, though. We are almost, like, anything that I build is almost always going to be a bracket 3 aiming up for a bracket 2. I like running decks with restrictions. I don't like running decks with tutors. I don't like running decks with fast mana. I don't like running decks that are running infinite combos. So those denials will always keep what I'm building out of bracket 4. But I promise you, the things I build here do punch up to bracket 4, because that's what I deal with at my locals. So let me know what you guys think in my comment section below. Hit the like button if you haven't already. Subscribe if you haven't already. Remember to check out my mana pool link and stuff in the description down below. And as always, everybody, insert end of video tagline here. Hey, thanks for making it to the end of the video. I really could not do any of this without all of you. Those of you watching, and especially those of you who support me on Patreon. I wanted to go ahead and take a minute to thank all of you who do that, because with YouTube being what it is these days, I really cannot do this full time without the support from each and every one of you. Those people would be Red Joker, Purple Poundini, Jemshin, Britzkrieg, Jupe the Malignant, Michael, Ravalern, Mabbity Babbity, Astral Frontier, Tales of Atonement, Nixie Chan, Kiri Artemis, Limor Pinku, Love Bunny Games, Victorian Alchemist, I'm not saying the last part of that, and you know that, Aurora, Leela Ururaka, Arcton Arclacier, Kiratorian, Dren Hadamata, Jordan M, John L, Lord Bleck, Smiling Game Master, and Fireshard. Thank you so very much. But since you're here, why not go ahead and try watching another one? There should be one that's on the screen right now. And if you are a patron of mine, I wanted to go ahead and thank you again for all of your support. There is still a video you could press, though, if you'd like. I would appreciate it just a little bit.